Welcome everybody to our first discussion. We got a group of talented, experienced veterans in the industry with us to discuss a variety of topics. I thought it was great to just get their thoughts on things, our big talking points that we always bring up personally off the clock. So why not share some discussions with the rest of you guys? Today I'm joined with Alex Madsen.
Hello, hello.
We have Sun Lu.
Hello.
And I just call it by one name. That's all you need to know. Lucas.
How's it going?
Yeah, so oftentimes we're used to working long hours, cranking away, getting it done. But of late, it became more apparent and more important to talk about a work-life balance. Recently, we got a chance to work more remotely, to spend more time with family and loved ones. And we thought it's important to take a step back and reevaluate for people who may be still caught up in the grind, part some knowledge to say, hey, get some advice. Hey, maybe you should take a step back and touch grass, smell the roses, enjoy life. I think I'll hand things over to Alex Madsen, since he has, of late, it's been more conscious of balancing things, spending time with family, and trying to work, schedule things out, get things done. So kind of get your thoughts on maintaining that work-life balance.
I can jabber about this for a minute. Yeah, I know for sure that I am terrible about maintaining my work-life balance. I yelled at by friends and family that I need to take more time for myself and actually focus on unwinding a bit from work rather than trying to constantly be thinking about what it is that I can do for the next project, because there's always another project. I will say that I've actually taken some time for personal therapy and couples therapy and that kind of thing, and actually learned some communication skills, which then translate into being able to actually express to people around me that I need to have someone poke me to take a break and remind me to get lunch and that kind of thing. I've always been bad about working through lunches. Employers get mad when you break the law for that kind of thing. So they'll yell at you to remind you to go take lunch. But if you're just working on your own in a one-man studio, then if you don't set a timer or you don't have, like my teacup Yorkie, a small animal to remind you that it's time to take a break, go outside, get some sunshine, then it's easy to fall into the pitfall of, I just worked for the last 12 to 13 hours straight and I didn't eat. I barely got up to get water or do anything else. So it's really easy to just get into a groove for whatever you're working on and just keep going and keep going. But it is very detrimental to your health in the long run. It's a good way to experience burnout, which is something our industry has a ton of. It's not just all employer related with them working us to death and then kicking us out for the contract being done. It has a lot to do with time management on yourself as well, and being willing to, for lack of a better term, stand up for yourself a little bit enough to take your breaks when you need to is a complicated issue.
It kind of seems like the industry conditions you to form those habits, right?
I know my military career definitely indoctrinated that. Get the job done, get the mission done, and then take a break.
Well, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Work-life balance is one of those things that American culture in particular, we're always trying to find a balance, and most people will either overcompensate in one direction or the other. They'll either take too much time for the family and then work gets to be over encumbersome and becomes a psychological burden, and then you don't want to work, and then you don't have money, so you're not able to support your family, and then it becomes a nasty cycle of doing one in excess in order to take care of the other. And there's a happy medium in there somewhere. We just have to actively work on finding that happy medium.
Most definitely.
Very well put.
Yeah, we can move on. Lucas, do you have any insight into your experience balancing things out? I mean, I will admit, you're a workhorse, man. I've experienced it firsthand on multiple projects. The fact that, I don't know how often you shared this story, but I just remember the one time when you were trying to problem solve something at work, and then you went home and you kept tooling away at it. And I remember the next day I saw you come in. You look like a zombie. I'm like Lucas, what happened, man? Like, was there a tragedy in the family? You couldn't sleep last night? What's going on? He's like, no, man, I was up all night because I needed to figure out a way to problem solve of how to do what I was doing yesterday better today. And I'm like, man, you're a machine. And I think some of us get like that, you know, we're like problem solvers. We see an issue and we got to figure out not just a way to solve it, but a way to solve it more efficiently because time is money and the work keeps piling on. And I know those of us who've worked in stereo conversion, we experienced that where you would have to work longer hours and also get more done and be more sleep deprived and still be producing more work, better work with shorter turnaround. And you're like more and more tired. But rewind back. Yeah, what are your thoughts on work-life balance, Lucas?
Oh man, I think would have to elaborate on a few things. I wouldn't want to say that the industry conditioned me to be that way, but being like a one-man show, you know, in your own world and not so much relying on other people, you know, it just kind of going in the direction that life takes. When you start working professionally, and, you know, at least in my case, I ended up working at this place. It was pretty cool. I used to clean walls at the school and take out the trash, that sort of thing. And I worked at McDonald's, and then going from that to actual professional work in the industry. And then only being there for about 3 or so months, and then being let go because, you know, of X reasons and, you know, people just not believing that the work that you had in your demo was yours. Like they just didn't see you being so young in the industry and you're displaying this material and they just don't believe it. And then being let go and then all these mixed emotions kind of coming into play where it's like, where did I go wrong? I would come in. It's like, I love the work that I do, but going back to the whole one man thing is if you don't do it yourself, then no one's going to go to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
No one's out there promoting you. So you kind of have to do that on your own. That kind of puts priorities and maybe not the right ones. Work life and balance. Work actually became life. You know, being the best that I could at whatever I was doing, whatever I was learning.
Mm-hmm.
Like work ended, but it still continued. Continued in my head. Like Mike was saying, you know, just problem solving and, you know, how can I guarantee that I'm going to be there next week or next month?
Mm-hmm.
And even if I'm not there, just guaranteeing myself I could continue on to hopefully a better place, you know, maybe more pay. The balance of work and life just kind of blurred. You know, everyone just kind of understands that.
Yeah.
But it gets to a point where other people, because they're not built like you, and other people are able to have this balance, not bringing work home and, you know, keeping a separation between that. It just caused a lot of, I wouldn't say problems, but it caused a lot of hurt and priorities, not being able to take breaks because you're always on that constant. I guess I would call it a high, just building yourself up because it takes time. Everything takes time. And eventually hitting burnouts and seeing things from a different point of view now after the pandemic kind of puts things in a new light. And now it's more like maybe work smarter, not harder. I guess that's what I would have to say.
So you had kind of like the mentality of having to prove yourself, right? Being new in the industry.
Yeah, I would say so. School is only going to teach you so much. And last time Mike and I talked, you know, I was saying trial by fire. And, you know, that only happens when you're out there in the wild, in the industry. So I think if I didn't have that mentality, I don't think I would have reached the heights and worked on all these things. But, you know, it doesn't come without any consequence either. You lose a lot of sleep, a lot of birthdays, holidays, family time, that sort of thing, which is in essence more important. But you also have to guarantee to yourself, you know, as a provider, it's unfortunate, but you have to take on those tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to elaborate a little further on what Lucas was talking about, just the fact that in his experience from his inception into the industry to now, he's always been freelance contract. If I recall, the longest gig you had, Lucas, was 5 months, right? Yeah, so it's always been this hustle. And I experienced that too in my first gig. Again, coming straight out of the school, trying to prove yourself when my employer was like, you got to produce work that's on par with people 8 years your senior. You got to be as competitive with them. And within a month to ramp up and to improve my photorealism rendering skills. And I got there, but it was stressful. It was difficult. But like Lucas was saying, trial by fire, it's like sometimes you just have to level up and get where you need to be part of the conversation to remain in the industry. And yeah, it's difficult because we were at the conversion house for a number of years before we left. So we had a feeling of stability that at the end we all kind of took for granted. We all kind of felt like when they made the announcement that they were moving to Canada, it felt like we had that rug pulled from underneath us. And now we had to kind of scramble and reassess. Do we move to another country just to keep your job? You know, is that worth it for us to move to a place where we don't have family, we don't have friends, and all you have are your coworkers and the trust that your company is going to keep you around? You know, is that enough for you to make that leap?
Mm.
Yeah. So it's those kind of stresses that come up that put that pressure of, are you going to have a job tomorrow? That's something that us in our industry, we always have that feeling. And some people are kind of pointing to maybe that's why there's higher anxiety and stress overall throughout the country, because you don't have your grandparents situation where you had tenure, where you were going to have a pension, you're going to start your job there, you're going to work your way up, and you're going to retire at the same company you started working for. Especially in our field, it's a scramble. When's the next thing coming? And that's why you have some people who moonlight for multiple studios at once if they're able to. They have their like day job, come home, do some freelance for another client, or on the weekends, work on something else. So there's a constant grind that we have in our field that I don't know if other professions have that. And I am even noticing the average person is talking about the constant hustle of having 2 or 3 streams of income coming in. So I don't know. I felt like at first it was something unique to what we experienced, but then I look around like, oh, a lot of people are kind of falling into the same trapping of that lifestyle.
Mm.
There's been a lot of shift toward that since pandemic.
Yeah.
Just because a lot of the part-time jobs shut down, or the full-time jobs shut down their hours in order to facilitate fewer people being around at a time. But in order to keep the employees, everybody got their hours cut back on just regular day jobs. So in order to make up the amount of money that you used to be able to get with a full-time job, you now have to have 2 to 3 part-time jobs, which leaves you with fewer benefits and harder ability to maintain that work-life balance, because you've got to scramble to keep the same amount of money that you used to get coming in. I know my experience with going into the conversion house pretty much straight out the bat, out of getting my degree and finishing film school, was definitely something I didn't realize how good of a thing I had for a number of years afterward. Honestly, it took me like 8 years or so to realize how fortunate I was to fall into a large studio machine that way and be able to focus on one particular set of skills, not have to be constantly expanding my skill set like I have come to do as a freelancer, and to be able to go in to have that steady paycheck and know that, yes, there's always going to be more shots to work on and there's always going to be more stuff to turn around, but at least we're doing the same thing every day, so to speak. We're utilizing the same set of skills with the same set of programs every day, not having to struggle and expand your knowledge base past one particular kind of toolkit. You can expand your knowledge base to get faster and do the job more precisely. But when push comes to shove, working at a conversion house is one particular facet of doing film work, whereas working as a freelancer, you have to be able to step outside of doing 2D work and integrate 3D work and then switch back to 2D and concept and be able to create and utilize assets for integration into compositing later on, and then run the whole thing through lighting passes. And it depends on what you're doing as to what particular tool bag you need to pull out of the closet. But working as a freelancer is entirely different from working in a studio environment.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, yesterday I was interviewing my buddy Steven, and that was a great interview. We went into so many topics because I went to school with him. We were really tight, and he went through that whole journey of starting as a generalist and then made the hard decision to pivot because he always wanted to be a character animator. His dream, for as long as I knew him, was to work at Disney, work at Pixar, and how he had to make that conscious shift in his spare time to take additional courses to improve his animation skills. And he told me he did a yearly review where he would go to CTN, get his reel reviewed with all the other students coming out of school. Because he told me they would do two types of reviews. They would give you like the softball review because they know you're green and you're just trying to get a starting gig and you're not going to do character animation at a high level as an entry level. So they would do like a soft review of their reels, but he would go up to them like, no, give me the real review. Come at me and tell me all the things I need to fix. And he was a generalist for 8 years. And most of that time was taking additional schooling so that he can finally be a character animator. Now he's lead character animation supervisor at Activision Blizzard. He's on the Overwatch team. So that was great chatting with him and catching up and picking his brain on that stuff. But to hear how it was like a very conscious decision that had to be made, that took time, that took coordination. And then eventually, he got married, had family. But yeah, a lot goes into us being more conscious of our time to make it for other people. And I was joking with him that back when I used to really hang out with people a lot and always come through and do stuff, I would just show up like a zombie. They would say I would just show up and I would just pass out on the floor because we were working mad hours at the conversion house. But yeah, it's definitely something that I know we made that comparison before and you signed off on it, Alex, so I'll make it here, where it does kind of feel like we are troops in the trenches together, side by side brothers, which is why we have such a tight bonding connection at the same time, because we really rely and depend on each other. Lucas and I have depending on each other a lot at places that we worked at to come through, to show up, and to be honest if we're needing assistance to get things done and to really kind of push ourselves. So there's always a new limit that you think you've hit the wall and then you realize you could go 3 floors up. We never stop pushing. And that can cause burnout. It can cause stress. It can cause neglect in areas that when you're young and you're early in the field, you don't realize it. But then, as Son and I would joke, we feel like every year aged us 10 years. I mean, we all got white hairs now in our beard. It's fine. We all look like how we feel now. I know sometimes it sounds harsh how we talk about it, just being reflective, being honest. But there's always a sense, part of the work-life balance argument is to make time for friends and family. But while we are working these long hours, we are making friends. We are having a new extended type of family. And Son and I would always comment, that's why we push through. Even though I may look at a situation, if Lucas calls me up and be like, all right, it looks a little murky over there, but let's do it. We did it before.
Do it again, yeah.
And I think that's an important aspect to highlight is the fact that there's a familial aspect to the experience that we've had. In terms of the voices you'll hear on this podcast, a lot of them are people that we've worked with previously that we built that type of bond and relationship with over a decade ago or within the last decade, because it's a completely different type of dynamic that begins to develop that you appreciate and it keeps you around, even though things may get hairy, things may get a little crazy. You have people that you can depend on. As Lucas kind of pointed out, sometimes it may feel like it may fall upon you, but as you spend time in the industry, you realize that you have other brothers and sisters in arms willing to ride it out with you, which makes it something that's palpable and you feel now capable of taking that on.
Yeah, very true, man. It's a nice and eloquent way of tying it really nicely with the bow.
Yeah, with a cherry on top. And Son's going to put that cherry on top because that's what he does. Puts the finishing touch on something. He needs his sign of approval.
Spread that butter.
Spread that butter, yeah.
It does forming these new relationships and friendship, as you said, kind of like a secondary family. It pushes you to work even harder for everyone because you don't want to let everyone down. So that's another thing that while it's well-intentioned, it could lead to burnout as well because you're working way too hard for so many reasons, right? When you have all these things you're wanting to do when you're working, like you want to problem solve in your off hours, you're wanting to put in extra hours to maybe make up for team members who are away or helping your teammates out while also working on your own work.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with all of that? I mean, we've kind of forced it, right? We just went with it. We went with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that and balance your life at the same time?
In those moments, it's weird. It's almost like you have an extra reserve, like when you hear stories about a mother who's able to lift a car to pull her child from underneath. It's almost like there's another type of adrenaline that you produce and you tap into, give it that extra mile, which I think is when you tap into that reserve too often is what causes burnout.
Yes.
I think part of the reason why we're having this segment is because maybe a few of us are really bad with the whole work-life balance thing. I think for me personally, dealing with a heavy workload, I just need some type of creative outlet. I think you always need a de-stressor, right? One of my buddies would say he always made time. I'll go back to Steven, right? Where he said he had a full-time job, then he had school that he would do after, like a 10-hour day and then 6-hour. So it's like only a few hours to sleep. But he made sure he got his exercise in. He's really big into Tai Chi. There's also something about doing something for yourself to help you work through and de-stress. That's good. I think if you feel like you're giving all of yourself to everyone else, and then you start to feel there's a lacking that starts to develop because you're not doing anything for yourself. So that's when if you do too much at work, if you're always making time for everyone else, but don't really make time for yourself, you may begin to realize that you're starting to itch you in a certain way. But if doing something for others in your spare time is rewarding for you, then it has a healing effect to you. So it doesn't feel like you're sacrificing anything at that moment because you're spending time with that person. You're doing something for someone else and you're rewarded instantly. Because sometimes work, we don't get the instant reward.
Mm.
You got to make it better. You got even more work to do. There's not an immediate reward factor to what we do that can kind of eat away at you. But I think if you can do something where it's like, oh, I did this, that feels awesome. I think if you're tapped into that reward, pleasure center part of your brain in a healthy way, not just saying looking for instant gratification everywhere, because that doesn't help you at all. But if it's that balance of you feel you got something out of it that's meaningful to you, as opposed to you're just doing stuff for everyone.
It's a very good perspective to have.
It comes in the vein of being able to take a personal pride in the shots and the things that you're accomplishing work-wise, to be able to look at the completed shot and say, yeah, I did that, and that's going to contribute to this overall thing in a positive and productive way. Being able to allow yourself to take ownership of the successes that you create. That's one of the ways that you can definitely avoid getting that burnout feeling of just being overwhelmed with, okay, yeah, we finished that, but there's this much more to do. Take the moment and actually appreciate that you created this shot, oftentimes from nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think taking pride in the work you're producing definitely adds to the burnout. Eventually you'll get that.
Mm.
I hit that. Maybe I was trying to figure out how much I could do before I hit that point. And I was quite surprised at the amount of work that I could do and lack of sleep and all that. Eventually I found out that through my peripherals, I was seeing spots, figures, shadows, maybe.
Oh my.
It was to see my limit, how much I can handle. I was surprised how much I was able to do. Versus now things are a lot different. And, I find myself more tired now than, when I was doing all these crazy things.
It's all catching up.
That's true. Yeah, it's almost like it's this weird thing where we just keep running and running. You just keep being part of the chase. You're just caught in the rat race. You don't realize it. It's not until you stop. It's almost like you're running away from stuff and then it finally catches up to you and hits you. Sometimes all at once. I had that happen to me one time from work. I was bedridden for 2 weeks because I just didn't realize how much strain and how much I was pushing myself. Poor eating, lack of exercise, lack of sleep, all that sort of thing. I think a lot of us have had that feeling of we had crunch and then immediately after we get a cold or, we get sick because it hits us how much strain we put on ourselves. If you're Lucas, you just take the limitless pill.
That did happen a lot, didn't it? After every project, you'd have a handful of people just call out sick.
There were times, just kind of going back a little bit, where it's not so much being conditioned, I think I mentioned earlier, but it's just if you're not doing it, then, no one's going to do it for you. But I had this idea where I was trying to provide a service, eventually seeing myself as a commodity. So if I was hired at this place and people had a better work-life schedule than I did and others had families, and if they weren't able to continue on, I would fill in the gaps. To me, going back to what you were saying, Mike, helping out, like tapping into that. It did feel good because I felt I was doing good for the company, for the team, for the project. And in retrospect, I don't think I would do things differently, but maybe I wouldn't feel so eager, I would say. But it kept me around longer.
Mm.
So being a commodity, I think I was living up to that, trying to stay with that mentality all the time, no matter what the project was, always being dependable. People count on you and can they call you back?
Mm.
So in essence, I think I was being more helpful. I enjoy what I do. Work is work, but I enjoy it helping others get home faster. And, other people are just not built the same way.
You more or less made yourself be that indispensable object to, or the indispensable tool to the company as a whole, to be able to fill in the gaps where others needed breaks. You would be able to fill in.
Yeah, not glamorous by any means, but it was a necessity. I was able to, and being in the service of others, lasted a lot longer than I expected to. And being in the freelance game, things aren't planned out. I've been wanting to be hired and, be staff, but that just doesn't happen. So
You're just too cool, Lucas. They see this guy who just comes in, has this vibe of like, don't worry about it. Just pass it this way. No questions asked. You're like, man, who is this guy?
They're intimidated by you.
Your sandwich is too bland. What happens, Lucas? He'd be like, I got you. Bust out the travel size tapatio. Always ready.
Yeah, always ready, man. Can't go anywhere without the deal.
The BLT, hold the tomato, give me the tapatio. That's how we do it, man. It's been too long, Lucas.
It has been too long.
Good times. Yeah, man. You have any other thoughts, son, on the subject?
Yeah, just kind of questions like Lucas, you said you're mostly like freelance and contract now.
I've been freelance for over 10 years. So contract, not so much. I guess it would be the same thing, no? Like freelancing, you're always on the contract.
Yeah, it's either freelance or staff. So you've always been freelance.
Yeah. So I've been freelance since May-ish of 2014. So
now that you've realized the work-life balance because of remote work, because of the COVID, have you ever found yourself turning down a job if you're asked?
No, I take anything.
You take everything?
Everything and anything. And sometimes, overlap with 3 projects and still manage to get them done. Might be frowned upon. Again, freelance is not easy and it's not by choice. It's just kind of like what needs to be done. So, and that also cost burnout. But if I didn't do it, I don't think I would have made rent or bills or, whatever was going on at the time that forced me to do and accept.
That's rough. So as an artist, most everyone is forced to work more than they should be for the cost of living.
I think doing all of that, I imagine that it must have helped my mentality, during the pandemic. Because if I was able to do all that when things were stable, I guess, then I could handle whatever the pandemic threw my way. And for the most part, helped out quite a bit. And now it's just waiting for the industry to catch up and hopefully things are back the same and go on that journey where I want to experience burnout again.
I think you're the first person that I've ever heard so far that is actively seeking the burnout and that you're looking for that as kind of a reward.
Again, not trying to be all glamorous about all that, but it's been too long. I keep myself busy, keep learning and all this free time I have just to maintain. I think maintaining where we were at the time, till now with subscriptions and all that, just to be in the game. If the industry decides to call right now, I'm like, let's go.
Like I mentioned earlier, Lucas is a workhorse. He's easily next to Jeremy, probably the person I think I know who just used to being on that wild grind where I just don't know how he does it.
We were doing that for a little bit.
It was a situation where we had to keep working. We were basically taking turns napping. Is that what we were doing to get through it? We each had our little alarm clocks. We had rotating shifts of who was up because we had like 24/7 deliverables or potential work that needed to get done at a moment's notice. Yeah, something about it, man. I think once you get used to it, earlier we described it almost as a high, it does become like a drug in a weird way. I know we produce something, serotonin, I forgot what it's called, something like that, where it is a chemical that your body starts to produce when you have stress. And once it starts producing it, your body thinks it needs to keep that chemical. So it's like a counter to like adrenaline. It's like something else. Your mind starts to get in the process of, we need to be in this state. We need to keep grinding. We need to keep going. And it's subconscious. So sometimes we're aware of it and we are able to address it. Other times you become like Lucas, and even I kind of fall into that trapping a little bit. If you saw the mountain of work I have piled up for myself for no reason, you'll be like, why do that to yourself? It's because that's what I'm used to. Not being in that space is weird. It feels unnatural. And it's not an intentional conditioning, like Lucas was trying to say. Like, it doesn't happen consciously. It doesn't happen because you're directed to. I feel like we get into these kind of conditioning habits or states of thinking because it is kind of like, well, how are human beings like top of the food chain? We had to cater to certain type of habits and behaviors to survive. Now it's a kind of different because now survival means just paying bills and being able to put food on the table. It looks different, but we still tap into the same type of things on a subconscious level, I think, which is why we can kind of find ourselves in a, what do they call it, like a hamster wheel or rat race or something. It's not intentional, but we feel the need that we got to do something. Like, I think earlier the word provide was brought up, protect, provide. That's something that we kind of adhere to a little bit. As long as we feel as if we're productive, that we are contributing in some way, then we're in a solid place. No matter how crazy things get, we still kind of feel good about the situation. But when you feel like you're not producing, or you're going to put yourself in a bind, go Lucas mode and you say, I got 3 gigs, let's run it. No breaks.
Yeah, no breaks, man. Sitting there sometimes, you're just working on whatever it is. Like I said, I like what I do, and time just doesn't even register.
Yeah, that's called state of flow. That's something that artists, and they say gamers get into that as well. But I know it used to be just a creative thing where you would just exist in a space where there is no space time. It's almost like you make a little pocket for yourself and you just crank away. And
that's bad too. I think I gained quite a bit of weight during that time. And I don't know if you remember, Mike, but during that time, I also brought weights. So we had weights, like, dumbbells.
I remember. Yeah, come on, Mike. I'm like, nah, I'm good.
So do a bit of thing, nothing like crazy, but enough where you're just sitting. So
that's true.
We put 2 desks together or close enough where I could do some dips, just something to get the blood circulating, because just sitting there, you become like a zombie for sure. Stepping out, like, into the light, like, actually hurts the eyes.
It's good on you for doing that, because, working out at work, but people might look at you kind of weird.
Oh, they did, and I didn't care.
Yeah, exactly. Like, at least you're taking care of yourself.
We instituted that for a minute when I was getting ready for my wedding, when we were working at the conversion house. For a few months there, we were every hour on the hour, just do 5 or 10 push-ups. We were doing honey badgers on a timer.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to hear. At least I wasn't the only one. I knew I was going to be spending hours and hours, on end, and not being mobile. Other people would say, oh, we have a gym right here at the studio. You could just go over there whenever you want. And that didn't apply to you. Your shots need to get done, and too many people are asking for these things. So you either take an hour to go do all that to get your workout, or you do it in place and deliver. So that may not be the best way to go about it, but if you don't deliver, then you're not going to be there.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of like just advice and insight. It's like, the only person who's going to care about your health and well-being is yourself. If you're talking to people who are looking at numbers all day, whether it be how much their money is being spent or how much output is being delivered, they're just looking at numbers. They're not conscious of how you're doing, how you're feeling, what kind of state of mind or physicality that you may be experiencing. You got to adhere to that. If your body's starting to stiffen up a little bit, you got to get up, you got to move around. Even water. So all of a sudden you start to feel like a little parched. Your eyes start to dry up a little bit. It's like, well, your body's not hydrated. So get up, get some water, and take care of yourself. But those are habits like Alex was mentioning. It was like on the hour, do something.
Mm-hmm.
If you read through it, they do recommend every hour you should be basically having like a 5-10 minute break. And then they push that to 2 or maybe every 4, written down as a policy. But yeah, every hour you should be doing something. You should be a little bit mobile, take a break, come back to some things, because at times you do get stuck. And when you get stuck on something, your mind keeps thinking about it. So if you get up, take a walk, come back, you probably will have a solution by the time you come back to your desk and keep plugging away. Or just seeing it from like a fresh perspective and you notice something you didn't see before. You gave your eyes a chance to rest. Yeah, things like that are important to kind of incorporate. And if you're conditioned to plug away like crazy, you have to now start to condition yourself to make that time and have that be part of your workflow so that you treat it like a marathon and not a sprint. I think that's a big mistake people can make, is going too hard too soon. If you know you got a long day, you got to pace for the long day. You can't be getting a habit of pounding coffee and energy drinks and all this stuff to get through.
Mm.
Because you, a guy coming out of college, he developed a heart condition. I thought that was crazy. I'm like, dude, you haven't even started working yet.
Jeez.
But yeah, that was wild. Yeah, he just drinks decaf tea the rest of his life.
I mean, it is easy to fall into the bad habits to make up your time as well. I mean, that's part of the reason, actually, that's the whole reason that I picked up a zero nicotine vape, was so that when the smokers went out for their smoke break, I could take the break as well and go out and socialize, even if I wasn't partaking of nicotine or a cigarette or anything. It was doing just flavor vape, and it was taking that small break in order to try and facilitate getting a small reboot on the brain.
Yeah, whatever you need to do.
Hmm.
That's great, because I knew someone who actually developed a smoking habit just to take those breaks. I'm like, yeah, you could have just not started smoking, but those breaks are good. Dare, don't do drugs,
Don't
kids.
do drugs.
Yeah, been a good conversation. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Take care of yourselves out there.
Yeah, I think that would sum it up. Taking care of yourself. You come before everything else. So if you aren't in a good state of mind, you won't be able to perform at your best. So having that balance, everything's about balance.
Yeah, I think the whole like work-life balance thing is a long conversation. So I'm hoping we'll revisit this later and also include other discussions about like physical and mental health and all those nitty-gritty things.
Yeah, this will definitely be a topic we revisit. We have a few people that couldn't join us for this discussion that would love to take part in this discussion in the future. So I'd love to get their insight on work-life balance. And all right, everybody, thanks for tuning in for this one. Be sure to check in next week to see what else we got going on.